One day, it's the last day before the general strike against Congress. We have the opportunity to say enough is enough. Something's got to change. And specifically, we've crowdsourced this legislative package, the Blueprint for a Better America, to demand that Congress end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. Because the Constitution tells us that we're supposed to be looking out for each other, that we are supposed to have a social contract that makes sure that people have a basic level of living in this country. So let me start this off with the preamble to the Constitution as a reminder of our mission statement, of our duties as Americans. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for you, the United States of America. Now, before we get into how the legislative package, what it does, and before we recap what it does and how it supports those five duties, let's talk about tomorrow, the general strike against Congress, against the duopoly, against partisan politics, against the system that is failing so many tens of millions of Americans, where we have 37 million Americans living in poverty. We've got 2 million who wake up behind bars every day, and yet we're spending close to $1 trillion on the military industrial complex. We've got to shift our priorities. We've got to rethink what we're doing in this country. And the way to do that is to get back to those 5 duties in the Constitution. Now, the general strike is a hartal. This is a practice that Gandhi utilized in India as part of his own nonviolent war of independence against the British. His story is fascinating for a number of reasons, but it sort of reads as a sequel to the American Revolution, except again, he fought the British nonviolently, and the British left as friends, unlike in America, where the British were not happy about leaving, and we got into another war, the War 1812, just a few decades later. So his technique seems to have worked out better. And because it's based on persuading people rather than compelling people. And so this strategy of unionizing as voters seeks to persuade Congress and their opponents in the general election that the thing to do is end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars, where the dysfunction in Congress and the fighting between the political party makes it hard for them to build consensus around things. We're turning that model around by crowdsourcing the legislation itself. We know that it's good, clean legislation that actually benefits the American people and doesn't have the lobbyists' dirty fingers all over it. And we can build the consensus by offering the same package to candidates in all 470 congressional races. So one, take it or leave it off. They can vote it up or they can vote it down. Nobody's intended to like everything in it, but that's how things work. None of the framers liked everything that was in the Constitution either, but they recognized America was worth saving. And 235 years later, it still is. So we're talking about Gandhian nonviolence, principled nonviolence. And so the hartal has three main functions. First is a boycott of the economy, total non-cooperation with the economy. So take the day off of work, don't spend any money. Don't spend any money on Saturday. So hopefully you've already filled up your gas tank or done any other essential shopping. But don't spend any money on Saturday and refuse to cooperate with the economy. Second is to petition, to demand what exactly that we want the government to do. So we can use tomorrow to contact our members of Congress and both calling their offices directly and via Twitter to pressure them to act, to put the blueprint for a better America on the president's desk within 10 days, no later than October 26th. And third, observe a 24-hour fast. Gandhi recommended dinner on the night of the 14th. So for those of us on the East Coast, essentially now, for 24 hours, and then skip breakfast, skip lunch, just have water, just drink water, and then you can have dinner again tomorrow evening. That is the fast for peace. Refusing to take sides in these partisan conflicts that are stressing our country out, that are tearing our country apart, and saying, no, we choose not to fight, by coming together as conscientious objectors and saying, look, we're going to offer solutions to Republicans and Democrats equally. We don't care about party affiliation. We just care about solving problems. It's already written down. All you got to do is put it on the president's desk and we all win. We can avoid a bitter, polarizing election and instead rally together as Americans around solutions. That's the mechanism. So tomorrow, do those things. Avoid the economy, contact your member of Congress, and if it's safe for you to do so, observe a 24-hour fast. Now is my own personal commitment to the fast for peace. It has been more than 20 days since the last time that I've eaten. So you'll excuse me. I'm not really feeling well today. Just been drinking warm water with salt and potassium to keep my electrolytes up, and a splash of Cajun seasoning. And just the smell of it today just makes me nauseous. I'm down to 175 pounds, so I'm still within a healthy weight. But my energy levels are low, and I'm ready for this to be over. But for the last 24 hours, the next 24 hours, the last 24 hours of my fast, I will just be drinking plain ice water, nothing else, to observe the fast for peace. And if you're a member of the American Union, you got an email from me this evening with a link to a special Zoom social tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. when I will break my fast and take some liquid calories and start reintroducing calories to my system. This is a fast of moral pressure. We are capable. We're capable as a country. We're capable as a nation of solving these problems, of addressing these, what Martin Luther King identified as the triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism. They are all interconnected, and we can address them together in one legislative package. We just need to generate the political will, the political power in order to make Congress act. And that's what unionizing as voters can do. Not by seeking power for ourselves, not by running candidates and saying, elect us, vote for us, but instead focusing on policy, putting policy over partisan politics. That's how we can help heal this country and avoid some potentially bad situations that we could end up in after the election. So we've talked in previous weeks about some of the principled nonviolence that the American Union is based on. Dr. King's six principles of nonviolence. Let's see if I can find those again. Um, okay, yeah, his 6 principles of nonviolence. Nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. Yes. By refusing to play the lesser of two evils game, we run the risk of endorsing and electing the greater of two evils. But the only way that we are going to disrupt the status quo is with a new set of goals, with a new paradigm. And nonviolence requires courage. Second, nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. We're looking to build bridges between all sorts of different political communities. With more than 50 policies in the blueprint, there's lots of things for every group to like, because it addresses so many different problems. Now, it doesn't address everything. It is not intended to solve everything and like be this the be all end all of legislative fixes, but it makes a massive step forward, for the United States. And so, yes, we're looking to win friendship and understanding from Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, Greens, Populists, Forwardists. Any and all political groups can find lots of things that they like that we can work together on. And together we can move America forward. We can build a better America. Third, nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. Again, we're not trying to defeat any particular candidates or political parties. Instead, we're offering solutions to everyone, to defeat injustice, to address those triple evils. Unearned suffering is for a just cause is redemptive. This is one of the aspects of the fast for peace, that engaging in this voluntary fast of willfully giving something up creates unity among people. That's a shared common experience that we all can relate to what it's like to be hungry. And so to share this common experience and this common goal demonstrates a willingness to sacrifice for the cause of peace and justice. Gandhi said, it is our duty to strengthen by our fasting those who hold the same ideals but are likely to weaken under pressure. And there's so many people who would like to end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars, but they don't have the courage to step outside that lesser of two evils paradigm. They don't have the courage to be willing to embrace nonviolence fully and a new paradigm. So the goal of our fasting is to strengthen them and encourage them to work together with the American Union to come together tomorrow on October 15th and then to vote together in November. His fifth principle was that nonviolence chooses love over hate. Again, trying to making this offer with unconditional love. We want to see Congress succeed. We would like that. This should be fundamental for all Americans, not to wish evil, not to wish bad on one political party, but instead want to see Congress succeed at solving these problems, at addressing these problems, at ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, ending the endless wars. This is a good faith offer made with unconditional love. Even the fringy congresswoman with 3 names, if they can put this on the president's desk by October 26th, they will get the American Union endorsement. And last but not least, nonviolence believes the universe is on the side of justice. Yes, Americans are far more often will do the right thing than not. And ending poverty empowers people to make their own choices. Again, generally, people will make the best choices. There's so much evidence for that, of how universal basic income does that. Ending mass incarceration, again, trusting people to, in general, do the right thing, and by establishing a safety floor, an economic floor underneath everyone, creating the opportunity for them to build happier, more productive lives on top of it. And yes, the universe is on the side of justice. it bends towards justice, but sometimes it takes pressure, it takes a force to make it bend. And the American Union, as a organization rooted in nonviolence, can do that bending. All right, let's go ahead and blast through the legislative package. So if you're watching this and you say, okay, well, ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, and ending the endless war sounds good, but what exactly does that mean? And you can find this legislative package on our website, anamericanunion.com. You can sign up and join the American Union, become a dues-paying member for $5 a month, and a good faith pledge to vote for the Republicans and Democrats who get the American Union endorsement. But yes, you can find this legislation on the website. And so I'm gonna share my screen here. And all right. So this is the, if you go to the website and find the blueprint page, this is the blueprint summary, and it's got a legislative summary. And so I'm going to go through this. If you're really, you can go back and watch this if you want to, or read it yourself if you want more details. But quickly, we've got this is the legislation is based on the 5 duties that are in the preamble of the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, an American Union, first we establish justice, and we do that with major criminal justice reform to end mass incarceration. We got subtitle A, which deals with a lot of police reforms. So the George Floyd Justice Act. These reforms generally apply to federal law enforcement officers because this is a federal legislative package. That's why we're demanding the members of the candidates for Congress in all 470 districts support this. And so here's what it would do. Require a training course establishing a clear duty to intervene when they see another law enforcement officer using excessive force. And then we incentivize states to do the same thing by withholding some grant money if they choose not to. Prohibit them from using deadly force except as a last resort. And so that training includes de-escalation techniques and outlining how less lethal force should be used first. States would be incentivized to enact the same policy. To further heighten accountability, there'd be a national police misconduct registry, as well as national certification standards for law enforcement officers. We'd make chokeholds and carotid holds a civil rights violation. Qualified immunity for law enforcement for civil rights violations would be removed, and the burden for prosecuting would be currently willfully, that they've willfully violated someone's civil rights, become acting knowingly or recklessly. Civil asset forfeiture, the practice of taking someone's stuff, even if they haven't been convicted of crime, that would be eliminated on the federal level and restricted on the state level so far as to be essentially eliminated. Sexual accidents or sexual contact between law enforcement and their people in their custody would be considered sexual abuse with no consent loophole. No-knock warrants. Those would be restricted to daytime hours for federal warrants, and they would need a specific judicial authorization. If they didn't have that, there'd be repeated knocking and identification for 3 to 5 minutes before they could break someone's door down. And states would be incentivized to enact a similar policy, including an end to the issuance of no-knock warrants in drug cases. Again, we have innocent people like Breonna Taylor and members of law enforcement as well that get killed when you knock somebody's door down and come rushing in with guns. It's not surprising that people can react defensively in those situations. All right, federal cash bail would be ended. States would be incentivized to meet decreasing annual targets for the percentage of cases where cash bail was used, from 75% down to 10%. The 1033 program that puts military surplus on our streets, that would be repealed. Then we got Subtitle B, the Weldon Angelos Justice Act. This would end the federal war on drugs. So by January 1st, 2024, the Controlled Substances Act would be repealed after we'd given notice to the United Nations that we were going to withdraw from some international treaties that promote and encourage the drug war. After this is done, completed sentences for federal drug crimes would be expunged, and those who are currently incarcerated could ask for a sentence review. Meanwhile, we're going to set up a framework for taxation, regulation, legalization that states could opt into, just like at the end of alcohol prohibition. States could make their own decision, right? Kansas stayed dry until after World War II, many years after prohibition was ended. This will be up to the states to decide. But the FDA will establish purity and labeling rules, and there'll be a 12% sales tax on recreational drugs. And we'll use that to fund treatment services for anyone who wants it. As other prosecutorial reforms include repealing mandatory minimums from the United States Code, amending the Espionage Act to protect whistleblowers and journalists like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, who are often charged under this law, and clarifying the Real ID Act that it only applies to people required by federal law to show ID as a condition of boarding a commercial aircraft. All right, then we've got some prison reforms. Again, we've got millions of Americans who are incarcerated, lots of people in prisons, and this would be a top-down fix. This would apply to the federal government first, who, there's 50 state systems that all have prisons, but the United States, the Bureau of Prisons, has, I believe, 122 prisons under its control and over 200,000 people that are incarcerated. So we're the largest. They're in charge of the largest number of incarcerated people. We end the use of solitary confinement as punishment, or I guess I should say dramatically restrict it, so that we come in line with the UN's standards of no more than 15 consecutive days. And then we'd incentivize states to put these same standards in place. Federal prisoners would be eligible for a sentence review after serving more than 10 years for offenses that have been repealed, like under the drug war, or if they've been sentenced to a mandatory minimum that had been eliminated, they would have the opportunity to ask for a sentence review. Before that can happen, though, before their sentence could be reduced, a judge would have to find that the person was not a danger to others, that they were ready for reentry, and that the finding was in the interest of justice. Victim statements would have to be considered as well. Also in here, we've got the recent Shin v. Ramirez Supreme Court decision that allows people that there's a lot of evidence that they are innocent sitting on death row. And the Supreme Court said, too bad, so sad, you're not allowed to introduce this evidence, despite the fact that you had terrible legal counsel, both at trial and on appeal. Sorry, that's not what the law says. So we can fix that law to make sure that people who have had ineffective counsel can present evidence to clear their name. Bureau of Prisons will be required to help people get identification documents. The Prison Litigation Reform Act, which creates a two-tiered system of justice, puts extra hurdles for accessing the judicial system on incarcerated people. That would be repealed, along with some grant programs that incentivize states to keep their incarceration rates up. any restrictions on Pell Grants for incarcerated Americans would be repealed. And then universal suffrage, which would establishes, so we'd establish that the principle that one citizen, one vote, end of story. Every American citizen would be able to vote in federal elections. To bring people together, Republicans and Democrats, we've got to deal with some of the wedge issues, specifically guns and abortion, that the two parties use to drive us apart and stop people from working together. So we've got a 10-year truce under Title II. So for 10 years, we would codify the Hyde Amendment, so no federal funds could be used for abortion. We'd enact universal background checks, but no firearm registry, very specific, explicitly in the legislative language based on H.R. 8. There is no firearm registry authorized. In exchange for everybody getting something, everyone also has to give something up. And so for 10 years, no federal bans on guns or bans or restrictions on abortion could be introduced. I know abortion is, since the Dobbs decision came after this legislation was under consideration. And so the idea of the federal government restricting abortion has gained traction. And so adopting the Blueprint for a Better America would restrict Congress from doing that for 10 years. Would in fact make it a Class B misdemeanor. So if members of Congress wanted to violate the truce, they could serve 5 to 30 days in jail as an act of civil disobedience. It's a commitment to their principles. All right, Title III, we're going to end the endless wars. And so first, we're going to get rid of these decades-old authorizations for military force. The 2001 authorization would sunset in 8 months, so that Congress has plenty of time to consider whether or not it should continue to be, or what sort of military adventures we should be in around the country. Right now, it's sort of the blank check for endless wars. The 2002 authorization for authorizing the Iraq War, as well as the 1991 authorization, those would both be repealed straight out. The Biden administration has come out in favor of these, repealing those, because they're not used. Cutting the military budget 10% annually for fiscal years 2024 to 2027. So it would cut about $1 trillion from the projected spending. And Congress would be able to override this with a 2/3 supermajority. But that would cut spending by about 1/3. The Secretary of Defense would hold referendums about all of our foreign military bases, some 750 of them, and ask the local population, do you want us here? And if they say no, respect their decision, and we'd close. We'd close those bases within 2 years of enactment of the blueprint. We would avoid nuclear escalation. Right now, we're looking at upgrading our nuclear missiles, and instead, the blueprint would prohibit upgrading the missiles, and instead require 50% reduction in our stockpile over 5 years. Most of our nuclear stockpile is already in storage, so this would just this would be a public and good faith message to the world that the United States is not going to start another nuclear arms race, that nobody wins with nuclear war. All right, we would stop supporting Saudi Arabia's war against Yemen, where it's one of the humanitarian crises that is going on in the world that we are complicit in. And so no more support for that. The use of economic sanctions, again, which kills tens of thousands of innocent civilians. It harms the weakest and most vulnerable members of society when we punish an entire population for whatever reason. The use of those would be restricted, with exceptions for during military hostilities or as part of a broader coalition. We'd also build on what President Biden has recently said. We're going to restrict the purchases of landmines and start destroying our stockpiles. That's great. But remember, because this is by executive action, the next administration could reverse that. And so that's why the blueprint will codify that prohibition on purchasing landmines into law. It would also restrict the development of lethal autonomous weapons that engage targets without further intervention by a human operator. Let's not. Well, it's another arms race where we don't need to start that race. And then Guantanamo Bay military prison will be closed in 2023, and detainees with pending charges will be transferred to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. All right, so now we're on to Title IV. Promote the general welfare. Now, welfare has a very specific meaning. It means health, happiness, prosperity, well-being. And under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, Congress is directed to provide for the general welfare. And the easiest, simplest way for Congress to meet that constitutional duty is with universal basic income. And so the blueprint sets up a universal basic income program. It's called the American Union Jobs Program because it is a reminder that as Americans, we have duties to each other. We have duties as Americans, those 5 duties that are listed in the Constitution. And so this program would be $1,300 a month for adults, a third of that plus a third for kids, as a reminder to just go out and be a better American however you see fit. Doesn't make people employees. There's no paperwork, no clock to punch, none of that. Just Americans as independent contractors to make America better however they see fit. Go volunteer in your community if you want. Or if you're already working, just consider it as a $1,300 a month raise. But that would start every American family up above the poverty line, and then that would address so many other problems in the rest of our country. Now, this would be done through the U.S. Treasury. They would create digital treasury accounts for all Americans and issue treasury dollar bills, a digital asset, digital legal tender that would be statutory limited to UBI payments. So you can't just Congress can't just create a zillion of these things. The only way that they could be created is if they go to the owners of the country, all the citizens equally. That's the only way we could do it, according to law. And so we'd create a trickle-up economy, again, solving a heck of a lot of problems in our country when we put a safety floor under everyone. So a few more details here on children's dividend, how it would go to the parents unless they made other arrangements or there was a court order. This would be overseen by the Social Security Administration because they have very low administrative costs. And so we project those at less than 0.5%. Not a bloated bureaucracy by any stretch of the imagination, but we've got dozens and dozens and dozens of existing welfare programs, most of which will atrophy and go away when we lift everybody above the poverty line. So we can get rid of that bureaucracy. For people who are on Social Security disability, this would not be considered substantial gainful activity. So we wouldn't kick anybody off those programs. They would stack. And for people on supplement SSI, space on the acronym. But they have an asset limit of $2,000 for one person, that if you have more than $2,000 in assets, that you can get kicked off the program or your benefits cut. And so that's been in place for more than 3 decades, that dollar amount. And so this legislation would lift that asset cap to match it to the annual amount of universal basic income. So $15,600 a year to start. The UBI payments would also be indexed to inflation. If you like your bank, you can keep it. The free digital treasury accounts for everybody. But if you don't want those, that's fine. You can set up a pass-through account and essentially just pull your $1,300 a month into your own personal the bank you have now, the U.S. Post Office would also offer basic banking services and ATMs at post offices so that you could withdraw your Treasury dollar bills as Federal Reserve notes and go spend them anonymously or in cash, however you want. So that's how that would work. And if for people who don't want anything to do with their digital treasury account, they could just let it sit there and it would be reported to the IRS as a refundable tax credit. So a $15,600 a year tax credit in that case. Now there are some taxes involved. So to express our public policy and to address some societal problems, there's a couple different taxes. First is a carbon fee starting at $20 per metric ton. So this is, we have a duty to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And that's our kids, and our kids are inheriting a polluted planet. So we're going to put a tax on pollution, and that's going to be one of the offsets for universal basic income. Likewise, there'll be a tax on plastic, a 20% tax on new plastic, not recycled would be exempt. And then for each plastic product, a flat 5 cents, 1 nickel for any plastic product that's sold. So adds nothing to the cost of a car or any appliances or anything like that, essentially, but it discourages single-use plastic. And so, again, we've got babies that are being born with microplastics already in their blood. We are polluting and contaminating this planet, and putting pollution fees on these things will discourage them without actually having to ban them, because plastic has useful uses. We just need to be more mindful about what we use, what we do. There's also, to address wealth inequality, there's a 12% subtraction method value added tax that would be paid by businesses, but they would, of course, pass that on to consumers as well. This caused a one-time bump in prices when it went into place. And again, to avoid any of these taxes from being regressive, they're combined with universal basic income so that they are progressive, that the bottom 80% of Americans come out ahead financially, but all Americans come out ahead through a general increase in the quality of life in our country. There's also a section here on voluntary value sharing, where companies can pay additional higher taxes voluntarily, whether they've done something wrong and they're trying to get good public relations, or for whatever reason, they can voluntarily add extra money to their tax bill that would then first pay down the national debt, and then that same amount would be created as Treasury dollar bills and distributed to all Americans as a year-end bonus, a Christmas bonus. And companies would be ranked on the percentage of their gross profits that they contributed to this. So we're going to let companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple and all these companies compete to see who comes out on top, who wants to do the most for the American people. And this also gives us a metric where, as consumers, we can support the companies that give something back. And so over time, these Treasury dollar bills will pay down and pay off the national debt and replace the debt-backed money that we have circulating in our economy now with digital assets. Similar, the digital greenbacks. Abraham Lincoln issued debt-free sovereign money during the Civil War, greenbacks, and because Congress has the constitutional authority to do so, and we can do the same thing in the 21st century. What else we got here? The child tax credit would be repealed because we're replacing that with $5,200 a year universal basic income for kids. All right, other American Union job benefits, a public option for health insurance. We saw millions of people lose their insurance during the pandemic when it started. A public option gives people, one, gives them an opportunity to buy insurance separately, not have it tied to an employer, and gives them greater freedom, greater liberty to change jobs and keep their insurance. So that's one. You get rid of the penalties on large employers. Right now, they're required to offer health insurance to their employees. So coupled with the public option, we get rid of that mandate, get rid of that burden on employers, let them focus on their own businesses instead of having to worry about providing health care to their employees. That's not why people go into business. Get rid of that. And also require Medicare Part B and Part D to negotiate for prescription drug prices, not just in a little tiny way like the Inflation Reduction Act will do a few years down the road, but for all of them, because the United States should be able to negotiate for bulk purchases and negotiate much better prices and save Americans tens of billions of dollars a year that right now is going to the pockets of big pharmaceutical companies. All right, other benefits funded by a tax on lawyers, a 12% excise tax on legal services. There would be a program that provides vouchers for legal services to anyone arrested to ensure immediate and universal access to basic legal knowledge. This again furthers our constitutional duty to establish justice. And then 18 weeks of paid family leave. Virtually every country in the world does this. America would also have 18 weeks of paid family leave funded by a 1/4% payroll tax on employers and employees. And this is unrelated to the American Union Jobs Program. This is only if you have additional employment. And we're going to save thousands and thousands of babies' lives by enacting this. If we can just bring our infant mortality rate down to the level of the European countries, who all have paid family leave, most of them much more generous than 18 weeks. But if we could just bring ourselves down to that level of infant mortality, we'd save the lives of one newborn every hour, of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year. 9,000 babies a year would live to see their first birthday instead of dying. We can do this. America can solve these problems if we get back to the Constitution, that we establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And when we come together as Americans and say, look, Congress, these are our terms. Get it done before the election and get our votes. Republicans, Democrats, we don't care. Just get it done. We can leverage our votes in a way that forces Congress to act or risk the electoral consequences in November. So that's what's in the legislation. Again, if anybody has any questions, throw them in the chat. We can talk about any of these in much more detail. You can also go back and review some of the live streams that we've done for the previous 20 nights that have gone into more detail about all the 104 sections of this legislative package. This isn't one of those things where you like Congress has to pass the bill so we can find out what's in it. This is publicly available on our website, has been for weeks and weeks, so that everybody can know what's in it. Everybody can find out exactly what we mean when we say end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. These aren't just nebulous promises. This is a very specific plan of action, a very specific set of solutions. And so we've offered this to all the candidates for Congress in all 470 races. And in all of those 470 districts, the American Union will endorse one of the top two candidates, the Republican or the Democrat, whichever two candidates are polling at the top. There's a couple in California's 10th district. They have a top two primary, and there's a Democrat and a Green that are running. So one of those would get the the endorsement. But the purpose of a union of voters is to be the deciders. And so rather than playing these partisan games, we're putting policy over partisan politics. And that means giving the incumbents first dibs. The incumbents get this done before the election. Great. We all win. We win a better social contract. We end poverty, end mass incarceration, end the endless wars. This is great. That is what we want. But if they turn it down, then challengers have the opportunity to swoop in there and steal the endorsement and this block of swing votes. Members of the American Union make a good faith pledge to vote for either the Republican or Democrat who gets the endorsement, because swing voters have the most power. They're the ones who decide elections, not third parties that pull votes away and end up being spoilers, but swing voters are the deciders. I mean, there's so many examples of this. In the 2020 presidential election, it was 25,000 people. If 25,000 people in 3 states had voted for Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden, it would have completely flipped the outcome of the presidential election. That's it, 25,000 people. In Georgia had the Senate runoffs last year to decide control of the United States Senate. And between the two parties and the special interests, they spent $800 million in 8 weeks to try and influence the outcome. They spent all that money. They got 4.5 million people to turn out and vote. But it was 29,000 people. It was less than 1/2 of 1%. If they had gone the other way and voted Republican instead of Democrat, the Republicans would still control the Senate. It's that small percentages, those small percentages that can control the balance of power. And so the American Union can leverage that by offering one plan across the country, changing the national conversation around solutions, end poverty, end mass incarceration, ending the endless wars. And tomorrow, October 15th, is the day where we can pressure Congress to act and force them to take a position, to either say, yes, I support the blueprint for a better America, or no, I don't support it. To stick with the status quo, to stick with the 37 million in poverty and the millions behind bars and the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars for the military industrial complex, all they have to do is nothing. They can do nothing, and so be it. But for Americans who are willing to pool their votes, who are willing to come together and endorse these solutions, pledging their votes for the American Union endorsement, there's 2 primary ways to do it. One is through the hashtag #VoteAU, Vote American Union, calling on Americans to vote together as a bloc for the American Union. And so please tweet that out on Saturday, October 15th, preferably in the morning. And challengers have until 1 p.m. local time to signify their support for the blueprint by using that hashtag, or if they're willing to participate in the Fast for Peace, hashtag Fast for Peace, as a way of a couple things. One, signifying their support, their willingness to vote as a bloc, for the American Union endorsements. And if the challengers are elected, as a pledge to introduce in the 118th Congress the blueprint and advocate for its passage, its prompt passage. This is the demand for immediate passage. And of course, the understanding is that if the incumbents actually get this done within 10 days, then the challengers will support the incumbents. If they ask the incumbents to do this and the incumbents do, then great. Everybody wins. We can accomplish a lot more as a country, not by fighting, but by collaborating. We've got this system right now of adversarial democracy, where somehow we think if we just fight hard enough, somehow the best ideas will come to the top, and then things will get better. No, Instead, in the 21st century, we can have collaborative democracy where we can work together, where we can get back to our constitutional duties, and we can come together around solutions that will improve the quality of life for all Americans. That's a much, much better system. And it's possible because when the framers wrote the Constitution back in the 18th century, they didn't have a lot of options. The only way they knew how to collaborate was get everybody into one room and hash things out. That was it, because the fastest way of communicating is what we lovingly call snail mail today. But this is the 21st century. We've blown past snail mail. We've blown past the telegraph and the telephone. We have instantaneous real-time communication all around the globe. And so we, the people, a people's Congress, can develop our own legislation. We can lobby, we can advocate for ourselves and present it to Congress and back it up by our votes. This is 21st century collaborative democracy, and it's the way that we can move our country forward if people actually want to solve problems. And there are a lot of people who are invested in the current system. It's the same way that, if you live in a certain city, that you support your local sports team, because that's just what you do. And so a lot of people are invested in the red team or the blue team because their parents were, they always were, or for whatever reason. Lots of people are invested in those teams. Okay. But there's millions and millions of people who are not, who are so fed up and frustrated with the dysfunction of Congress that they're looking for an alternative. But because of the way that we do elections, because we have winner-take-all elections in single-member districts, Duverger's law, political scientists know, this says that we tend to have a two-party system because that's the way that it works most efficiently, is that you got one winner and one loser. You've got one party in power, one party trying to get into power. And so that's why, going all the way back to the 18th century, we've had a two-party system in the United States. There's occasional little irregularities, some little waves where a third party bubbles up for a minute and then it gets flattened back out again. We have a two-party system. But by coming together, by crowdsourcing the legislative process, we can pit those two groups against each other, not according to party affiliation, but by pitting incumbents versus challengers against each other and saying, look, this is what we want done. We wrote it down, put it on the president's desk, or refuse. Those are your two choices, and you're going to determine whether or not you get our votes. As we've talked about, it just takes a small percentage to decide the balance of, to decide the outcome of many, many races in the country. And so a 3.5% block of voters back in 2020 theoretically could have flipped as many as 8 US Senate seats and as many as 59 House races. And so that is more than enough to determine the balance of power in 2022, where we've got a 50-50 Senate and a very closely divided House. We, the people, have the power to demand better of Congress and make it stick, as long as we remain rooted in that principled nonviolence, as long as we're willing to demonstrate courage and bend the arc of the universe towards justice. We can do these things. All right, let me finish up with the endorsement process. So on October 15th, tomorrow, the day of the general strike, we're going to be watching the Twitter feeds of the 1,000 members and candidates for Congress. And we're going to see who uses hashtag Fast for Peace and hashtag VoteAU to signify their support, their endorsement of immediate passage of the blueprint. And the deal works out like this. If an incumbent, incumbents have first dibs, and then they've got 10 days to act. If they didn't, though, then their challengers who demonstrated their support via Twitter will get the endorsement. if Congress fails to act. Now, what happens if neither the challenger or the incumbent is interested in ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, and ending the endless wars? Well, to me, that seems like a funny public position to take in the last critical weeks before the election. But in those cases, there will be tie-breaking procedures because, again, a union of voters gets its power from being the deciders. This isn't, well, we're going to take our votes and go home. No, because then you don't have any political power. If the power isn't used, it goes away. It might as well not exist. And so there's a couple of different options for the tie-breaking procedures, which members of the American Union are going to vote on October 16th, once we know where all these candidates stand. And so option A is to go ahead and endorse incumbents who supported the blueprint but weren't able to actually get it passed. We'll go ahead and keep them in office. Option B is to support all challengers. Let's kick out as many incumbents as possible, Republicans and Democrats alike, and send a powerful message. You know, again, in 2020, as many as 59 House races could have been flipped. And by kicking out members of both parties, it may not change the balance of power in Congress much, but it can send a powerful message that we're refusing to play this game of partisan politics. Option C is to use random chance to endorse one of the top two candidates. And that would be done through the Powerball drawing on October 31st, where we'll determine any of those remaining endorsements. And as a last case scenario, if a coin flip is needed to determine any remaining races or to determine the balance of power, and in some cases we've offered third-party candidates for federal office in exchange for their support. We've been offered them a chance to do the coin flip and do a random event to if necessary. The members will vote on which party should be represented by heads, whether it's the Republicans or Democrats. So that is how the ties will be resolved. All right, America, this is it. Join the Fast for Peace, finish your dinner, just drink water for the next 24 hours as your commitment, because fasting is like compromise, which is required for this legislative package. It's willingly giving something up. And this fast moral pressure can inspire our friends and our neighbors to work together to vote with the American Union. We can inspire Congress to act, to solve these problems before the election. We can do it. The American people have the power. All right. With that, I think that concludes our 21 days of live streams and our 60-day countdown towards the general strike. Thanks for everyone who tuned in during these last 2 months. And we the people, getting back to our constitutional duties, working with principled nonviolence, we can upgrade our social contract. Thank you. Have a good night. And yeah, AnAmericanUnion.com. Check out the website.